Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of WriteSea's Executive Interview Series, where we interview executives, C-suites, and owners of job boards, job aggregators, and other online recruitment marketplaces to learn a little bit about them, of who they are, their company, what their company's doing, and industry insights. And today we're here with Joe Meyer of ExecThread, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes. We are here from New York. We're actually here in New York City right now in Joe's home turf. And so thank you for, making the effort to come down to the village.
Absolutely.
And do this. I know you were kind of uptown a little bit, so really appreciate you coming down here. We're here at IML Studios here in the village just north of the Lower East Side. And so today, we just want to have a conversation with you, man, and talk about online recruitment and talk about, what's going on in the industry, what ExecThread is doing, because you guys are doing some really phenomenal stuff over there, and just get to know a little bit more about you. Is that good?
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So tell the audience and the viewers, who you are, what your role is, and what ExecThread exactly is.
Awesome. My name is Joe Meyer. I'm the founder and CEO of ExecThread. I'll tell you a little bit about ExecThread in a minute. I'll tell you a little bit about me first.
Okay.
Professionally, I'm a serial entrepreneur. ExecThread is depending on how you count, my fourth or fifth startup.
Who's counting?
Exactly. Some successes, some failures. Prior to ExecThread, I was the CEO of a startup here in New York City called HopStop, which was acquired by Apple a few years ago, which was a nice experience. Prior to that, I worked in the performance-based marketing industry, and I was CRO for a company called Quigo, which was a software company here in New York that was sold to AOL. And prior to that, I was a general manager at eBay during their early boom days.
The good old days.
Yeah. And around 7 years ago, I started ExecThread, and ExecThread is the core value proposition is it's a community and a marketplace of C-suite and exec level job opportunities, all the way from VP through board level, around 5,000 of them on the platform right now. And 100% of those opportunities you won't find on any other job board. You won't find them on LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, any career builder, et cetera. These are hidden job opportunities being worked on by retained executive search firms. And these are the most sought after career opportunities at the highest level of the food chain. And I could talk a little bit about how we source such opportunities, as well as the originating kind of idea moment that led to the startup of the company.
I mean, I think that's a very great value proposition. It's almost like, being the real estate agent that has access to the listings that don't hit the MLS.
Exactly. It's
right?
a very good analogy.
And
because
so,
every other job board out there just sources it from the same sources, the same feeds.
Yep.
So what's going to differentiate you from a value perspective, especially within this constituency of professionals? And it's not going to be the same jobs that are on every other platform.
Exactly. So it becomes more qualitative and less quantitative.
Totally. And just to provide further light on it, usually you would have to network like hell to gain access to these opportunities because you usually find out about them via word of mouth or referrals. We make it a little bit easier. The way I like to put it is what Kayak does to travel, we do for executive search.
Nice. So we do the networking for you, basically.
There you go. We're an aggregator and curator.
I like that. And so when did you guys start?
I started it in my proverbial garage, which was my couch in my living room.
The proverbial garage.
Yes. When I was still at Apple, actually, I started it as a Skunk Works project, kind of as a nonprofit.
Nice.
Pro bono. And it just started gaining traction. And, the first few dozen folks that were a part of it invited other folks to be a part of it, and it grew from a couple of dozen to a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand.
Wow.
And, it was originally based on a crowdsourcing concept where if you're approached by an executive recruiter for an opportunity targeted to you and you're not interested in pursuing that opportunity and those opportunities don't hit the job boards,
right,
you would be otherwise inclined to maybe share it with one or two people in your network that might be a good fit for it. But if you were willing to do that, would you be willing to share it in a community-based forum, a clearinghouse, confidentially?
Right.
So that your peers could gain access to it if they were interested in it, in return for the value prop of finding out about other opportunities that other members of the community are sharing and contributing.
Ah, okay.
So it's a group-based sharing network.
Nice.
And, within the first 2 weeks of starting this, we had hundreds of these confidential specs, access to them, being shared by people who don't even know me, sharing it with me, which is crazy because usually you only share it with
The people you know.
the closest people you know. And
Sure.
here, highly talented professionals, executives, were sharing it with me in return for the value prop of gaining access to the opportunities that other early adopters of this platform were sharing.
Well, you built a community.
We built a community.
And that's key. That's probably
Absolutely.
is the number one driving factor of your success, is that you built it on sharing and community before you built it on like profiting. And your origins come from a nonprofit or community charitable essence.
Absolutely. And in fact, we didn't start monetizing this platform until year 3. Obviously pre-funding, and when I was running it on the side, it was just pure pro bono and self-funded. But we had a point system, and still do, that held it all together, where if you contributed a job into the platform, you would get awarded points. And if you wanted to reveal a job opportunity being shared by another community member, you would trade in those points. So it was a give to get model.
Okay.
And that kind of kept the,
Authenticity?
yeah, I think it kept everyone honest. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It was give to get. You couldn't pull out of the platform unless you put into the platform.
Nice.
So you had to be a giver as well as a taker. You couldn't just be a taker, right?
Right.
And we all know the world is full of givers and takers, and
Sure.
balances between the two of them. But we eventually turned that into a subscription-based model.
Okay.
Where, in the early days, first 2 or 3 years, I can't tell you how many of those early ExecThread members asked for the ability to access those jobs at scale and immediacy, and they wanted to pay for the access. And the whole time I'm like, you know what? We're not going to charge the candidate. We're not going to charge the candidate. But we also didn't want to turn this into an executive recruiting firm, because the world doesn't need another executive search firm. So we eventually allowed them to pay for access and still earn points, but they can now trade those points in to reduce the cost or lower the cost of a subscription.
Oh, that's awesome. So
if you earn 100 points and it's a $200 subscription, it only costs $100.
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So when did you guys realize, okay, this is a full-on functioning business? It's no longer just charitable and community.
To be quite honest, I knew early on. Initially, I thought upon the initial generation of the idea, it had business legs to it. And I approached my former head of mobile development at HopStop, which was the company acquired by Apple, to see if he wanted to co-found it with me. He said, Joe, I'm going to go start another company that I've been dreaming of for the past 2 or 3 years. Nothing against your idea. Your idea is a really good one.
But
Your idea is just an idea. Why don't you go prove it out and prove that it's a good idea? And I said, I can't write a line of code, so how do I do that? And he's like, you're a smart, clever guy. You'll figure it out. So I started ExecThread with Gmail and Google Sheets. Gmail was my newsletter dissemination platform, and Google Sheets was my database.
I love it.
For purposes. So to answer your question, I invited around 4 dozen folks from my network, but not in New York and not in San Francisco, which were my 2 home bases.
Makes sense. Silicon Valley.
Those are 2 early adopter cities,
Right.
especially in the tech space. So I invited around 2 dozen folks in my immediate network in Chicago and London.
Okay.
I just thought traditional cities. And I had a few different job opportunities, believe it or not,
In those places.
to be able to grassroot this with.
Nice.
And those first few dozen invited other folks in their network to be a part of this. And within a couple of weeks, this grew to several hundred members and several hundred job opportunities. And that's when I knew there was something here. But then within a month or 2, I had a couple of executive search firms reach out to me saying, hey, I'm hearing about this new concept.
What's going on over here?
Pretty unique. Heads of strategy, heads of corporate development, things like that. And I said, you know what, if one guy on his couch in, Mamaroneck, New York is getting on the radar screen of, top 5 search firms.
Maybe I'm doing something right.
Yeah. And by the way, some of those early adopters started getting on the interview slates for some of those jobs that they were discovering on ExecThread.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm increasing the efficiency of this marketplace.
I love that. And so the jobs originally were coming from the people who were who were going onto the platform to look for an opportunity themselves, but then they knew about a job that, hey, my buddy over here, or maybe I have a company over here that's hiring for this C-suite, and then providing you with the job?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So there's a phrase in the executive recruiting or recruitment market called the hidden job market,
Yes.
which is jobs that are not publicly accessible or available on the job boards, right?
The good jobs.
Everyone knows they're out there. They're open recs, but you only hear about them via word of mouth.
Correct.
That's why they're hidden. And I thought to myself, I'm getting approached for these jobs, but I'm more interested in I was getting approached for them as a candidate.
Right.
Especially after you sell your company to Apple, you're getting more approached more and more.
Sure.
And I was more intrigued about the job opportunities that weren't coming across my desk than the ones that were, because I'm like, I know I'm more qualified. I'm qualified to get access to a lot more than are coming across my desk, but I have no access to them, right? Because either a recruiter approaches me or I hear about it from someone in my
You got to know
network.
somebody.
That's it. So I said, you know what? If I'm feeling this frustration, it's not a pain, it's a frustration. I wasn't looking for a job or anything.
Sure.
Then what about people who are actually looking for jobs? It must really be a pain point.
Correct.
So I tapped into that frustration and that pain point, which signified demand. So in any event, to make a long story short, my theory was the hidden job market isn't so hidden if you're able to tap into the wisdom of the crowds, of the collective universe of candidates who are being approached by recruiters for all of these confidential jobs, because in aggregate, they can unveil the hidden job market.
Right.
Just a matter of how do you get them to do that.
It makes sense.
So early on, the source of jobs on our platform, those first several thousand jobs, were all crowdsourced, peer contributed.
Wow.
But the demand for those jobs from those first several tens of thousands
Had to be super high.
exceeded the supply. I couldn't source this sort of supply of jobs quick enough to satisfy the demand because the network was growing faster than the supply.
That's like making a product and having unlimited purchase orders and your problem of fulfilling the orders.
So we needed to find other sources of analogous supply, which we've done over the years, and I could talk to that if that's of interest.
Yeah, yeah. Before we get to there, so the original person you were talking to while you were in, at Apple, did that person become an original investor or get involved?
So Apple's
yesterday's price is not today's price kind of thing.
Apple's a great company. Starting a company while I was still at Apple was probably
frowned upon.
Yeah, probably frowned upon, which is partially the reason I started it as a nonprofit.
Right.
Literally a .org.
Makes sense.
No revenue, no nothing. Pure voluntary. I'm opening this up to the community. But once I decided I wanted to commercialize it, raise funds against it, that's when I left Apple.
Sure.
And I didn't go to anyone at Apple for funding. I just didn't want to
cross that conflict of interest.
Church and state.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. Yeah. Places like Apple and the big companies are entrepreneur factories anyway.
Yeah.
They know that people aren't going to be there for a lifetime. So.
you just don't want to kind of piss in your own garden.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. That's nice. I was going to say eat where you...
Yeah. Well, there's different ways of saying it.
So boom. So you build this incredible thing. You realize it has legs. You realize it's collecting steam. Mm-hmm. Now you're full on into this. You no longer have just people submitting the jobs. You have to figure out how to fill the supply. How do you now transition into a fully scalable, worldwide, type of business?
Totally. Because we were beyond the point of early adopters at this point, and those next 10,000 or 20,000 members were coming from all over the world, and if they weren't seeing jobs on the platform that were relevant to them geographically, functionally, level-wise, or industry-wise,
they're not coming back.
They're not coming back. So we had to figure out how to scale supply. So we did it in two ways. One is, as we started building an audience, a large enough audience, hiring companies and recruiting firms wanted to start accessing that, curated, vetted network of talent.
Saves them time.
Exactly. So we gave them an opportunity to submit the jobs, but we knew that wasn't going to be the end all be all because the majority of hiring companies still want to keep these jobs somewhat confidential. And we, of course, gave them the ability to submit jobs without revealing the name of the hiring company and still keeping it, confidential.
Nice.
But what we did was, because we crowdsourced so many jobs early on, we started creating a proprietary database of executive recruiting firms, and which is now the largest database of executive recruiting firms in the world, short of what LinkedIn has access to, tens of thousands of recruiting firms. And we, have their website domains, we have their LinkedIn company profile domains, we have, the names and profiles of all their recruiters, et cetera. So I initiated a research project where I said, you know what, even though the majority of executive recruiting firms out there don't post their active searches on their website, some must, some have to, right? So we took those first 1,000 search firms that we crowdsourced jobs through, and I took one or two members of my team and said, hey, go spend the week and look at every single one of these websites, scour them, and find out if any of them list their active searches on their site.
And they did?
And a small percent did, but when you have a very large database of search firms and a small percentage of a large number equals a large number.
Right.
So now we have a proprietary database of thousands of executive search firms who we know post active searches on their platform, but they don't post them on LinkedIn or on ZipRecruiter or on Indeed or anywhere else, which, if you think about it from a candidate-facing perspective, there's not a chance in the world you as a candidate is going to find that list of searches on that long tail, recruiting firm site.
Right.
There's no way.
No.
And most of these executive search firms are search firms first and tech firms
second
third and fourth.
Yeah.
So, you can't find these searches, these sites on Google. They're not SEOable, et cetera.
Right.
So the chances of you finding out about these searches is none.
And truthfully, why would they put the search on there if people then they don't have to go through the recruiter to get to the job?
Exactly. So now we source in 3 different ways. We crowdsource like we originally did. We direct source from either the search firm or the hiring company submitting the job directly. They want access to the talent directly.
Yes.
Either confidentially or otherwise, or transparently. And 3, we discover the jobs on thousands of recruiter websites. And when I started ExecThread, I knew there were no barriers to entry in this industry from a exec search firm perspective, meaning if you wanted to go open up a executive search firm tomorrow, you could hang up a shingle and call yourself an executive recruiter and start getting searches and sourcing talent for it, right?
Right.
Well, there are literally hundreds of thousands of executive search firms out there. No joke. And it just takes a small percentage of them to post their searches on their site to get scale, which is what we did.
Nice. And so out of all the competition out there that kind of, mimics what you guys do, what makes ExecThread stand out from some of the other competitors? What is unique about you guys that makes you guys, is it the fact that you started early? Is it the fact that you built the community? What are some of those things that make you stand out?
I think that's yes and yes, but I was a guest speaker on for a community yesterday, the Wharton boards community. It's a community of around 1,000 Wharton alum who, help each other achieve board roles.
Love it.
And they interviewed me, put me through a Q&A, both from the person interviewing me as well as all the members.
Right.
And a lot of those members were already ExecThread members, which was awesome,
Full circle.
Exactly. But they said, you know what, initially I was skeptical because I just thought it was going to be another
executive.
Another job board.
Right.
Same jobs I'm going to find anywhere else. But, once I peeled back the onion and started kicking the tires on this, I realized, wow, you guys really do source unique supply. You vet it, you curate it. You make sure it's unique. You make sure it's an active search. The jobs I find on ExecThread, I can't find anywhere else.
Bingo.
I was like, exactly. That's where all the blood, sweat, and tears go into.
And you found anonymity with the companies who are hiring, where they know they can trust that if they need to not disclose who they are, you have a database of folks and you can get their jobs out there without having to give that information.
Yeah, I'm driving traffic to the websites of those recruiting firms that want it too.
It's a no-brainer, right?
And we've intentionally stayed focused on this kind of VP through C-suite and board role space because that's where this hidden job market is really most prevalent.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that director level and below, there is no such thing as a hidden job market. There is. It's just that
it's few and far between.
99% of the jobs at director level and below are on job boards.
Right.
it's debatable as to what percentage of exec level jobs are not on job boards, but it's closer to 50-50.
Right. That makes sense.
So the value prop is more pronounced at the exec level. And to be quite honest, there's less competition at the exec level.
100%.
Versus going, broad.
Going wide, yeah. So that's really interesting. Are you, or excuse me, should I say, is ExecThread also using any, high-end, back-end tech as well as potentially AI or anything like that going on? Or
so ExecThread's 7 years old. AI, ChatGPT, et cetera, either weren't in existence or were in their early phases when we started the company. But my entire background is SaaS and software and digital and mobile and software. So I will say this: we've automated everything. Whatever we couldn't automate,
love it.
We've created. We've either digitally enabled or automated everything. Whatever we couldn't automate or digitally enable, we've created self-serve user interfaces out of, so that our members can do the work for us and/or get what they need without us
having to do it,
having to bring manual intervention in.
Love it.
And whatever we couldn't automate, digitize, or create self-serve user interfaces out of, we have outsourced. So ExecThread is now a community of nearly 1 million members, vetted, curated community, registered members.
Predominantly, mostly where? United States, but worldwide.
It's global. It's global. To put that in perspective, we have over 5,000 opportunities on the platform right now. It's probably going to double or triple next year. Nearly 1 million registered members. Exceptionally high engagement. Around 50 to 60% of our members are engaged, active on the platform in any 1 month. We have 4 full-time employees and around a dozen contractors. That's it.
Lean.
Yeah. And, I'm not looking to build an empire. I'm looking to build the most,
robust,
the most scalable, profitable, best business possible.
I love that, man. I love that. And so,
and just to put it in perspective, my last company, which was HopStop, was the largest provider of pedestrian navigation in the world behind Google Maps in terms of walking in transit directions.
Gotcha.
So I got here from, Midtown today.
Yes.
Upper Midtown, all the way to the Lower East Side.
Yeah.
And I did the direction on Apple Maps.
Yeah.
The walking in transit directions, door to door.
Yes.
That category was invented by HopStop, my last company. And what we did was we brought, I forget even why I'm going down this topic, but what was the previous thing we were talking about?
Well, we were talking about, we were talking about scalability. We were talking about.
Oh, yeah. So we were the largest provider of pedestrian navigation in the world behind Google Maps. Apple Maps had just gotten introduced. No pedestrian navigation in Apple Maps, which was
Apple Maps was terrible in the beginning.
At first, right?
Now they're great.
At HopStop, and we had tens of millions of users at HopStop. We had less than 10 full-time employees at HopStop.
Wow.
And wound up getting acquired by Apple and now powering that experience within Apple Maps. So I'm kind of very familiar with this whole concept of let the computer, let the software, let the code do the work for you.
Yes. Be lean.
Yeah.
Nimble.
Yeah.
I love that. Did you learn some of those principles and philosophies at Wharton, or was that more so once you got into the field and started working for big tech firms that you learned some of that
I think
stuff?
I probably learned it at eBay, to be quite honest, because eBay, I don't know how old you are. It doesn't really matter, but
I'm your age.
You rewind the clock. eBay was that original peer-to-peer marketplace platform where the supply came from the community without eBay having to buy the supply or buy the merchandise.
Genius model.
Or warehouse it, right?
Yes.
So that concept of tap into the wisdom of the crowds, tap into the community to do the heavy lifting for you.
Yes.
Was really ingrained in me.
Wow.
And the other thing that was ingrained in me is when I was at eBay, one of our mantras at the time, I don't know if it still is people are generally good. Now, we all know examples of where that's not true.
Generatively.
The majority of the time, people are generally good, which is what makes peer-to-peer marketplaces possible.
Yes.
ExecThread is originally core was a crowdsourced marketplace.
Peer-to-peer.
Peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
People are doing it selfishly as well as altruistically.
Still, but for the good reasons.
Totally.
Yeah. That's awesome. Do you see our industry and when I say this, I mean the online recruitment industry, contracting, or do you see it getting bigger? Because, with the advent of AI, as well as, more and more jobs are going to the robots, where do you see our industry going in the next few years? And not only where do you see it going, but where do you see opportunity for those looking to potentially even get into it or scale what they already have going?
I mean, I think the whole HR tech space has a ton of innovation in it already, a ton of disruptors, a ton of innovators. And I think it's only going to get,
harder, better, or harder?
I think any large industry is ripe for continued evolution, continued disruption, continued, innovation. And HR tech recruitment is no different. So it's a big space, a lot of dollars in it, a lot of demand, a lot of eyeballs, a lot of companies, a lot of employers, a lot of candidates. You're going to have startups coming into it, tweaking it, modifying it, improving it, evolving it, optimizing it.
So like ancillary businesses per se, and not necessarily job boards, right? Because I'm seeing a lot of job boards struggling right now, right? And
I think, so first off, I didn't start ExecThread with the goal of creating a job board. It's really not what, and I still don't consider us.
It's not even your model. Like,
I don't consider us a job board.
You're like a peer-to-peer community of.
From the outside looking in, we're a job board, but we're very different. And I think where I'm going with this is, if anyone wants to get into the job board space, one, I would caution them probably not to, because it's hard to innovate and disrupt, which is why I think you see the majority of the folks getting into the job board space, and there's not many of them, doing it in niche ways.
Right.
Or verticalized ways, or
ancillary ways, things, being a service provider to it.
Exactly. Because you have to build critical mass and audience within a specific kind of, it's harder to do broad. It's easier to do vertical.
Sure.
Easier to differentiate yourself and provide value the more narrow you go, as opposed to the wider you go. So, again, I don't see the majority of innovation happening on the job board side. I see it happening in all other facets of recruitment.
I think you have a fascinating model simply for, and you have a lot of great reasons, but this particular reason, I think simply for the fact that you are the real estate listing service that you can't find the real estate anywhere else but for you. Like, that is such a good thing because it's exclusive. You have to come to ExecThread to even get access.
Well, it also lends itself really well to organic growth and referrals. How many times do you meet someone for a cup of coffee or a drink or a beer or a bite to eat, and the other person on the side of the other side of the table says to you, just confidentially, I'm thinking of starting to look around, or I'm frustrated at my job, I might start looking. You want to help that person, right?
All the time, yeah.
You don't always have the job opportunity that's a perfect fit for them, which would be the ideal thing. So what you want to do is you want to provide value to that person. And if that person's at that director level and above, and their next job is a VP job, or they're already at the VP level and they're going to stay at that level or above, ExecThread's such an easy thing to refer. You just
It's a layup.
Hey, have you ever heard of ExecThread? If not, you should. Here's why you should, join. That's awesome. That's how we grow. Yes, we have paid marketing efforts too, but
as you need to scale, but
exactly. But it's a great service that provides a lot of value that leads to a lot of referrals.
I love it, man. I love it. I think you guys have really built something special. It's unique. It's niche. It's organic.
But what I would add to that, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Speak over you. I apologize, but it's niche, but it's a pretty large niche. So
sure, because it's not like just pharmaceutical jobs or just.
We're closing in on 1 million registered members.
It's niche on the sense of like executives.
Well,
and high level jobs.
So early on, an investor in my company said to me, "Hey, Joe, stay focused on member growth and stay focused on member quality, because if you can scale that member base and keep it high quality, that's unique." And 7 years later, we've largely achieved that. There are not many other, if any, communities or platforms out there that have 1 million executives in them with high levels of engagement and trust. So now that creates opportunities to provide value to those, closing in on 1 million registered members, all of whom are executives, in other complementary ways.
Yes, I was going to say
jobs.
Beyond jobs. There's other ways to access that market and monetize it, help it, and do other things to bring more value to it.
To bring more value to those members. If you do that, the other stuff will follow.
Awesome. Do you guys do any like executive level events or anything like that? Have you?
So we did early on, and I think ExecThread has been a challenge of resisting opportunities more so than pursuing them. Meaning,
what do you say no to? Because there's a lot of things out there.
Yeah, because we could have turned this into an executive search firm. We decided not to. Not scalable, not strategic, low multiples. The world doesn't need another executive search firm. We could have turned it into a traditional community in the sense of, member directory, member events, all of that. Does the world really need another community of professionals in terms of, there's plenty of them out there, believe me.
Okay.
And it's a heavy lift.
Absolutely.
So, and very hard to differentiate and delineate yourself in an already crowded space.
Sure.
But I remain very confident that there's ways that we can continue to innovate and provide value to those million registered members, all of whom are executives, in unique, differentiated, and value-added ways.
That's great.
Which is where the future lies.
Man, you nailed it. If you had to give one piece of advice to two different groups of people. First one is to an executive that is out there or has the experience to become an executive. No worries, it happens.
All right.
If you had to give one piece of advice to an executive that's looking for a role, even though it's less competition, it's still a lot of competition. What is that piece of advice that you see that's going to help them get hired, other than just the skill set, like of what the job is? Like, what is that one piece of advice that you would give someone looking for an executive level role in order to up their chances of getting that role? Yeah. And then I'll ask the second question after you answer that.
There's a ton of different
Sure.
pieces of advice I could offer up.
Okay.
I think the best one is always be looking, and don't wait until you need a job to start doing the things that are going to position you for your next job.
Great point.
So in other words, I think this happens more often than not at the executive level for various reasons. You have a job, you kind of like the job, maybe you really like the job, and you get set in your ways. You get complacent. You're not thinking about your next role, or you're not thinking about what happens if my company decides to go in another direction? What if my company starts slowing down? What if my company gets acquired? What if I get a different manager? All of which could lead to you no longer being in that position.
Sure.
Not because you voluntarily left, but because you're being asked to leave.
Right.
And when you're an executive, you're dependent upon that high income.
Sure.
To cover your high cost structure.
100%.
Right? And not many executives, believe it or not, can last more than 3 to 6 months without that high income continuing to come in. But when they realize that they need a job, like that oh shit moment of, man, I have to start job searching. It's like, oh, wow, I haven't touched my resume in 10 years, or I don't even have a resume, or the resume is not up to date.
Or my LinkedIn
isn't up to date, or I haven't been networking, or I'm not part of any professional networking groups.
Great point.
Or I haven't joined ExecThread and kept my finger on the pulse of the market of what's out there. There's so many things you could be doing that aren't big time sucks.
I like that.
That if something happened where you all of a sudden needed to start job searching, you can hit the ground running, as opposed to starting from a stopping point. Being
proactive instead of reactive.
Correct. And, complacency is the worst possible thing in my opinion.
Great point. And then what is another piece of advice to, companies out there that are looking to hire great talent? Obviously this answer would be, hire ExecThread. But what are some things that, companies can do that are looking for that executive level talent to find those right people? Because it's really tough to find really, really good quality people. And then do you bring in a bunch of different recruiters? Do you put up ads everywhere? That's just kind of taking a shotgun approach to recruitment as opposed to a sniper. Yeah. So first off, I wouldn't necessarily recommend hiring ExecThread because we're not a professional search firm. We're not an executive recruiting firm. Yes, you can source and find talent through our network
in self-serve.
He's being
sort of
modest.
ways.
I like that.
But, I think a lot of hiring companies, i.e. employers, don't leverage the networks of their own of their own employees.
That's another good point.
Think about it, especially at the exec level, most employers have a good number. They have a management team.
Right.
The management team could be 5 people or it could be 50 people.
Yes.
But those 5 to 50 people have networks of 500 to 5,000 people each, cross-functionally.
Solid point.
Across geos. And oftentimes these executive searches are kept confidential, not only externally,
but internally.
And oftentimes not for great reasons, to be quite honest. But if you could tap into the networks of your management team to find talent, because those are the people that, are going to find really good folks because they've worked with them in the past. They're going to go to the best people they've worked with in the past, the people they can trust, people they want to work with.
They're vouching for these people, so their name is on the line now.
And they know what the culture of the current company is to know if the person
is a good fit.
Yeah. So
that's a really great point. And an ancillary benefit from doing it that way is that it probably at scale builds company culture.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? Because friends work well with friends, you know what I mean? Or colleagues,
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I'll bet you that's an ancillary byproduct of that. Well, thank you for that great piece of advice. We like to make these quick little interviews. We're going on about 25 minutes now. So please, if you could let everybody know where they can find you, how can they find ExecThread, how can they follow you guys, if there's social media, please let everybody know how they can find you.
Yeah. So if you want to email me directly, it's joe@execthread.com, ExecThread.com, joe@execthread.com. ExecThread.com is our domain, our website. @ExecThread is our, X handle now, Twitter, across all social platforms, et cetera. And, obviously on LinkedIn.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking to our viewers. The whole purpose of these interviews is just to share wisdom. You gave us a lot of great nuggets. Thank you for talking about ExecThread. Congratulations on the success of what you guys have been doing. It's a really unique model, and it's working, and it's wonderful to see that. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to the studio who allowed us to come and do this podcast here. We really appreciate you guys. Look out for the WriteSea Executive Interview Series on LinkedIn as well as YouTube. And if you want to be interviewed, just send us a message, send us a DM, and we'll make sure that we get back to you and we will highlight your story. If you guys happen to be at any of the big conferences, we'll be in London next week. So by the time this comes out, it'll be after that event, but we'll be at Job Boards Connect. We go to RecBuzz, we go to TA Tech. We'll be going to that in London. And so we try to hit all the conferences and whatnot so that we could keep our pulse on the industry since we are a new company. We're growing really fast. We just got a nice pre-seed round.
Awesome.
And so
congratulations.
Thank you, man. We just landed a very, very large company in Africa. Nice. So we're on the African continent now.
I was about to say, pretty big continent.
Yeah. So we're working our angles and gearing up to be a worldwide company. So thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. Yep. And make sure you guys sign into ExecThread if you guys are executives.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good one, brother.
No doubt.
All right.